All right, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Endless Report. This is episode 17. You might have missed us last week. That was supposed to be episode 17, but we're back again this week. Not a lot of news last week in the video game space, but definitely some this week. And between the last 2 weeks, we definitely got a lot to cover today. So my name's Tony. I'm joined as always by Ben. Hey, Ben, how's it going today?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing good here. It's another Friday here. We got some gaming news to talk about, so I'm excited to get into it. It's always great to be talking about the news here on Friday. So as always, I kind of like to just jump right into it. Without further ado, we're gonna get started with our first story here today. So this is something that we talked about a bit last week, and I want to just follow right back up on that with the beginning of our show today. So God of War Ragnarok, it's been a hot topic on our show for the past few weeks. It's been a hot topic in a lot of gaming conversations these past few months, and finally it has gotten that release date. It got a very short trailer. It was basically another cinematic trailer. Unfortunately, no new gameplay glimpses or anything like that. But we have seen a few more snippets here and there with some social media coverage, and it seems like we're getting more of that God of War from that, the reboot God of War from 2018 that we know and love. So here I kind of have up on the screen here some of the pre-order bonuses. I thought we would just briefly cover this before we get into everything else today. So what you'd expect here, some digital kind of armors here on the main pre-order bonuses. And then you also have, if I can zoom in here on these, very tiny. I wanted to show the physical edition. I'm not sure why this picture here is so small, but if we can get that going, yeah. Comes with its own Mjolnir hammer, Thor's hammer there. Thought it was pretty cool. Some kind of physical. You see some like D&D dice here. It looks like a dwarven dice set. It looks some pretty cool physical edition stuff there. I just wanted to highlight that because we don't see a lot of these awesome like physical editions unless we see these kind of big releases like we've seen in the past. So. They're here and there now, but with like digital games and with everything it's been in the past few years, I always love seeing one of these like special editions. Like back in the day, they used to have a lot more of these like big crates of merch and stuff that comes with games, and I feel like you don't see these as often, around now. So I think it's pretty cool to see this. That's really all there is on God of War Ragnarok, other than the release date, which is November 8th. So it is coming this year, like we said. We kept talking about when's this game coming out. But November 8th is the date, so you can put that on your calendars. I don't think that date's moving. It seems like that's pretty much set in stone. So I'm excited to play the new God of War this fall. It's something coming on PS5 I'm definitely excited about.
Quick correction, it's November 9th.
It's November 9th, right.
The other game we're going to talk about is November 8th.
Thank you for saying that, because we have another story right on the docket here, and I'm going to get right over to it and might as well just start talking about that, which is Skull and Bones. I think we talked about this a bit 2 weeks ago. We were talking about waiting for this gameplay reveal. So in between our last episode and now, that did happen. We also got the release date there, which is, like you said, November 8th. So thank you for the correction there. And we're going to get that Skull and Bones game on November 8th and God of War on November 9th. So kind of a back-to-back there with those two releases. But if you don't remember Skull and Bones, we did talk about this to a good extent in our last few shows. So I won't go too crazy in depth on this gameplay here, but I do want to give you a glimpse real quick of what they showed at this worldwide gameplay reveal. So if you remember, we did talk about this on the past Endless Report, but I'm sure you might have some thoughts on this as well, Ben. But back in the day, when we talked about the old Assassin's Creed ship gameplay from the old Assassin's Creed 3 and 4 with Black Flag, it being a real main focus. So that system has been, worked on Ubisoft for a long time now. This game's gone through a lot of different stages, a lot of different, development changes and things like that. So we're finally seeing this game released this year. It's been a long time coming. And we got a good glimpse. I believe it's about an hour-long stream, this gameplay. So I do want to skip through here, but just to kind of give you guys some more glimpses. Those of you who are watching at home, you could see that a lot went on here. They went really in depth on this shipbuilding, customization. I believe there was like mining of like trees and resources off of islands and things like that, and kind of like collecting resources as you go along your pirate journey. So with all that, I kind of want to throw that to you, Banks. I'm sure you have some thoughts about this game, and I would love to hear what you're thinking on this, and I'll let this gameplay run in the background as we do.
Yeah, I mean, so I saw a few videos after this was announced and the gameplay was revealed, and a lot of people were questioning, like, who's this game made for? And it's kind of been a question that a lot of more recent games, especially Ubisoft games, like X Defiant, there's a few other Tom Clancy games that a lot of people are like, they don't look bad, but like, who's asking for them? But I'll go on the record and say, this is a game that, would have been better off releasing like 3 years ago when it probably was expected to. But I personally absolutely love the idea of building a full game around the pirate aspect of Black Flag. I'm also glad because one of the first things I was watching, I was like, for the first bulk of it, I wasn't sure, is this going to be a Sea of Thieves where like you're just
Mm,
PvPvE and like, solo players, and too bad because I'm, primarily a solo player. I don't,
mm,
my time doesn't afford me, a lot of scheduling with a bunch of people to play. So I was glad to see that they are going to have PVE servers, and then you can opt into PvP
mm,
servers if you want. That's great. So I'm, first pass,
yeah,
very like cautiously optimistic.
mm,
I'm excited to see more, and I don't pre-order anymore.
yeah.
Going back to
Neither
the
do I.
pre going back to the quick talk on the pre-order bonuses for God of
Yeah.
War. I used to buy every collector's edition for all the games I was
Mm,
interested in. And just over the years, I've stopped. I generally can't bring myself to pre-order anymore. I
mm,
will wait a few days after to get, IGN, GameSpot, and a lot of, I watch a lot of
yeah.
YouTubers who do reviews that are more independent in the review sphere.
Mm,
So I'm going to wait, but I'm definitely, cautiously optimistic that this could be a game that I do get, that 30-minute, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to sail around, I'm going to sink a few ships.
mm.
Great. Um, I won't lie though. Uh, I'm reminded of the Elden Ring. There's a little bit of a controversy a
Yeah.
few months ago, or a month or two ago, God, whenever Elden Ring was released. There were some developers that commented about how the UI wasn't very great, and
Mm,
there were some images going around about if Elden Ring UI was made by the Ubisoft team, and it's a little scary how accurate those images were looking at this. I do have, you know, uh, if it's on PC, the UI is probably scalable. So again, it's one of those things.
hmm
I'm not going to hang myself on it. Like, I'm not going to get hung up on it. But the one thing, probably the most, ooh, I don't know about that part, was the
Yeah.
resource gathering off islands. It
hmm
feels a little. This is going to sound really harsh. It feels a little too mobile game addy for me.
E.
It,
I know what
you
you mean by
know,
that.
it looks too smooth, too clean, too perfect. It just looks like something I'd see in an ad for a
hmm
mobile game that has nothing to do with the actual game itself.
Yeah. And you have
But
one of those
again,
characters like you're chopping wood and the tree just like disappears. That was kind of how it looked
yeah,
in that Skull and Bones gameplay as well. So I kind of get like that whole vibe of that, which you 100% what you're saying there.
like I mean, it's probably. I mean, again, I don't want to be too harsh because
hmm
if that's the only thing in the game that I don't like, but otherwise the sailing piratey aspects there, and it's what I love from Black Flag. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm
Yeah.
really hoping that it comes out, and because I we talked about Sea of Thieves a few weeks ago, and I would love to get into Sea of Thieves, and I've tried multiple times, but it's just as a solo player with no
Mm.
PVE server option,
Yeah.
I can't play for 40 minutes to have a group of players come out completely blow me out of the water and then lose 40 minutes to an hour of progress. So
Yeah.
this might
That's
be
tough.
that. This is kind of exactly what I'm looking for if we aren't throwing curveballs at this point.
Yeah, I agree there. And I'm definitely, I have to agree with just going back to the UI thing as well. I'm definitely of the notion that I prefer, and this is a preference. And like we talked about too in our last episode 2 weeks ago, where especially with, some of the conversations we had there about art style and things, how fans are obviously very opinionated. Look, I'm very opinionated as well. Doesn't mean I'm like boycott, I shouldn't say not, but not boycott, because I might not be. We'll see if I buy this game or not. But it doesn't mean it's ruining my entire year and I have to go complain to a developer or anything like that. But I am, we all have our preferences, and I do definitely prefer like a more minimalist UI. There's a lot of time, obviously I'm definitely biased here when I say this, so I'll definitely acknowledge this bias. But when I play a lot of those like PlayStation IPs where they, especially like Naughty Dog's a great example of this, with their like Last of Us and Uncharted, where everything is like it's just like a white symbol. There's like no color, there's like no really clutter on the screen. It's like only
Mm-hmm.
the exact thing you're doing, and then it'll pop up. And I feel like I really like, not that I don't want to know, my stats and everything that's going on, but I really like the idea of like letting that lead you into the immersion. And I feel like Ubisoft games don't really have that focus, I feel like, on immersion in the same way, where with their UI, at least in my opinion, where it's very, very cluttered. And I'm not saying that, I'm looking at this gameplay here. I kept it on the screen for that reason, just to talk about it. But you have that full, that typical Ubisoft quest, like steal these jars of oil and how many you're counting. And I feel like I've seen that in Assassin's Creed and everything so many times. And obviously, this is an Assassin's Creed basically spin-off, if you will. I guess you could call it that, with that kind of engine and that system. So it makes. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense here, but I would prefer a little bit less of that clutter, or maybe like some games have that, like, click the left stick to see all the extra UI elements that you're not seeing right now. There's things like that you can do to kind of mitigate, the cluttered sense of that while still giving out all that information. So you see here, two developers playing here. I mean, that being said, it looks great. I mean, like you said, the big talking point with Assassin's Creed Black Flag I always hear from other people, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with this, is that it wasn't necessarily the best Assassin's Creed game in terms of the narrative of the assassin order and all that, but it was an amazing pirate game, and it was an amazing, it wasn't maybe not the best assassination stealth game, and you and I have probably said this on the stream as well, but it was, it was a great pirate game, and if you like, people have always been clamoring for pirate games, really one of those like genres of like, you think like ninjas and soldiers, it's one of those like action genres that like you don't really see, I guess, utilized a lot in terms of media other than like Pirates of the Caribbean. I feel like it's very, I don't know, there's almost like this like slight, I don't want to say corniness that comes with pirates. I feel like in modern culture, but I feel like it's not as taken as seriously as like one of these dark, like gritty type of time periods. Like when you think of like Vikings and samurai, I feel like pirates don't always get their due in gaming in the same way that some of these other like, westerns and things like that. Some of these other genres of like things do get. And I think that's, this definitely fills a void there.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that I think one of the biggest reasons that pirates haven't been done a lot. I mean, there's obviously Sid Meier's Pirates, decades ago, and that was a blast. But like water physics, rendering, and everything is super difficult. Like to be able to create really good looking water that actually matches up with like what you're seeing in game and like what you're feeling in game is really difficult. I mean, anybody that's interested, Sea of Thieves has a handful of GDC talks talking about like the technical part behind it, and even then, like their water visually, Sea of Thieves water is hands down the best. Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely, like, man, like just helmeting your ship through waves is incredible. But even then, they still have issues with like the water line, where if you fall in the water, there could be essentially like gaps separating where the visual of the water is and where the water actually starts. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's, that is also why like pirate games are just not really done, because like, you basically, 80% of your tech budget has to go into making water and sailing
the ocean. Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how well that is handled here. But I mean, real quick, this stood out to me. The last thing I'll say specifically about the UI during this presentation is it almost feels like the UI is like scaled up to like 200%. Like if it was, because I won't even say it's cluttered because of how big everything is. Like at one point they had the chat box pop up, and it was like a quarter of the screen.
Yeah.
And that feels like it's something that like when they recorded the footage, it was scaled up so that people could see it. But it's had this opposite effect of like, yeah, you could see it, but that's kind of all you can see.
Yeah. And I just paused that stream here just to give like kind of context on that. Well, obviously, this chat isn't opened up here on the UI here that I'm sharing, but yeah, I think if you like, I don't mind these health bars here. Like now that I'm looking at it again, like you said, it's not like it's that cluttered. I mean, I would want to know that information for sure. I just think that things like world event active, like when you have things like this all on every corner of the screen and they're all like you said that size, I don't think they all need to be that large where you're like you have like this kind of like almost like I'm forgetting the word here. Not a silhouette, but that like that circle around the edge of the screen. It's a film term here, and I'm forgetting. I'm kicking myself that I can't think of that term. But I just think that kind of like border around all the UI, you get that tunnel vision, and I just think it's not really the most conducive like to the gameplay, I would say. But I like the way the compass is working here. I like this kind of curved design in the corner. I think like more of that kind of like minimalism, getting that like all the information on screen without it being too cluttered, having a giant, black box here, like this world event active. Like you could probably do that without taking up that much screen space, I think. But again, I'm not a UI designer, but by trade, I'm not here to nitpick everything in the UI. But I do think, everyone has their preferences, I'm sure, when it comes to any game's UI. I mean, we talk a lot about Bethesda games like that. Skyrim, one of my favorite games of all time. I was definitely downloading mods on PC to I think Sky UI was a big one. The menu mods, or even having trying to think immersive UI. I think it was another one by Gopher to shout out to those mods where you only have on screen combat, stuff when you need it on screen. Like
Yeah.
I'm all about that kind of stuff. I'm all about like immersion, especially when it comes to games where you're trying to be into it, single player, and you're kind of on your own journey. I'm all about that immersion aspect.
Yeah, and I mean it's noticeable because like the UI they have there in the lower right corner is a good call out because like that looks fine to me. But then at different points, I assume when they're determining like what cannon shot to fire, it pops out a bigger UI in that corner. And I mean, again, it's just one of those things. Like some of these elements feel like they're just a little scaled up for some reason, and it just makes it, I don't think the UI is actually that cluttered. I think everything's just scaled up weirdly, and I don't know. My hope is that was just for the presentation to make it easier to see. If the game releases like that, and even on PC, it's that big of a scale. I hope there's options to scale it down.
Yeah, I think just options. We talk a lot about it. Accessibility is not something that's limited to just like like preference here. This is something that really affects accessibility too. If you're especially if something the UI is too small for you. On the contrary, if you can't read it, it's something that's almost on every PC game that I really could think that I've not every, I shouldn't say every, but it's very prominent on PC where I feel like it's not as prominent on console, and I think that would be really. Just give us, I'm always a fan of a POV slider, of more of resolution options if applicable, of like in games when they have frame rate versus performance modes. Like I'm always open to more and more options there, especially on console where things are a lot more limited. So I don't see anything wrong with keeping UI the way they want to have it, but just giving us the ability to scale things. I think then everybody's happy there, and that's the beauty of being able to do that. I think with UI options and HUD options there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's about. Again, I want to reiterate this is coming out November 8th, so that's coming out not too far away. The fall, the end of the year always seems like it's far away, but it's a few months out, so we're getting there. But I do want to keep Ubisoft in the spotlight here. We do have another story coming from Ubisoft today. I don't know if there's any last thoughts on Skull and Bones.
I'll just say it's probably the overlap of audience between Ragnarok and Skull and Bones, that Venn diagram probably isn't that huge. But just imagine if Starfield had actually still been releasing on November 11th.
Oh, man.
That would have been a very interesting news cycle for that week to see what game came out on top.
And I think knowing that it's not releasing November 11th anymore, I would dare to say that these two release dates maybe weren't even planned until after that was delayed a few months back. Right. I think that was, I don't know why you'd want to compete in the same 2 days before the most, probably besides Elden Ring, probably the most huge release in many years. I think to have Elden Ring and Starfield would have landed in the same year would have been two of the biggest game releases over multiple years in the same year if you think about it that way. So. It seems like, that spot's open now. Let's jump in on that almost. It's kind of how I feel about it, especially with Ragnarok being, the big PlayStation, release this fall. Obviously, they have The Last of Us remaster coming in September, but Ragnarok's the real, new game coming this fall for PlayStation. And to have Xbox kind of lose that space, I think November 9th is a great spot for Ragnarok, but.
Yeah, I mean, the skeptic in me maybe thinks that Ragnarok had a bit of an earlier release, like maybe they were shooting for October, and then once Starfield backed out, that might have been part of the reason for them changing up the plans of a big reveal at the end, because they were like, hey, we got an extra month to work on this now. Let's not can we push it back that month without affecting sales and all that? Well, our biggest competition just left. Yeah, let's take advantage of it. So I mean, obviously speculation. I have no, I have nothing to back that up, but I would not be surprised. I mean, again, if Starfield backing out of this year didn't impact not just these two, but probably other games release dates for the end of the year that we'll find out, probably in the next few weeks.
Yeah. And I want to shout out to it. We got a question here in the chat actually from Joss. Hey, Joss, how's it going? Good to see you in the chat here. We're going to keep going with the show today. So thank you guys for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We're going to get on again. Like I said before, we have some more Ubisoft news there. But I before we move on to Ubisoft news, I do agree, Ben. I do think that again, we love to speculate here. It's not that I could say that in stone or anything, but it really does seem like that's a likely explanation for the move to the release date there. But unfortunately, moving on to some not so ideal news. This is again coming from Ubisoft, so a bit of a mixed bag week for them here. But this comes out of PC Gamer here. This article, but this is a story that a lot of people covered, and this is talking about Ubisoft pulling access to their older games. So this is something that in certain contexts happens here and there from time to time, and it's always kind of a story. But this one in particular has gotten a lot of attention here, and it's sparked a bit of a larger conversation again in terms of like game ownership and digital ownership over these properties. So something that happens a lot is when older games kind of hit a certain lifespan. These companies decide it's not really as viable to continue keeping their servers up. So we've seen this about a bit back with some of their older Ghost Recon games. I'm going to say not just at Ubisoft, other developers have obviously done this as well. But where these older servers, like for example here for Assassin's Creed 2 and 3, the multiplayer servers are going to be going offline later this year, September 1st to be exact. So this is something that's kind of expected on older games, although it's still something that's really upsetting if you're a fan of these older games and these servers do go down. It's really the end of an era, literally, where you just can't have that experience ever again, where it's kind of fading away into the sands of time there. to not be so dramatic, but really it is kind of like the end of this experience. We talk about movies. You can always go back and get an old movie unless it was like the old film era where things were burnt up or was missing. So something about game preservation is obviously something that we're pretty passionate about. I talk about this a lot on the show. I think every time we get into a story like this, and unfortunately, these are just experiences, these multiplayer experiences that really can't be preserved unless you keep those servers running. So to an extent, there I do understand that. But here's where this story kind of gets a little more less than savory, if you will, compared to these typical announcements where they've actually destroyed access to all of the old DLCs for a few of these games. So that includes Far Cry 3 here. I believe Driver San Francisco is another, Prince of Persia for the Forgotten Sands, Assassin's Creed Liberation, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Assassin's Creed 3. All of these games are even if you bought these DLCs, the DLCs are now being revoked. So even if you have access to them, you pay your money for them, you are no longer going to have access to this content, which in a lot of cases here, especially for all these single player games, is single player content. And there's no announced plans to either refund people for this purchase or, rather re-release these in a package so that they can, work properly. Again, that's something that could possibly happen in a later date, especially after this backlash. But for right now, they're basically saying, yeah, that game, that DLC you paid $20 for, Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, I'm assuming is going to be, on Far Cry 3 there in 2012. Sorry, that's just gone. So you just, again, you could say it's $20. It was, 10 years ago. Who cares? But, I come from the standpoint of, digital or not, I paid for this product. I would like to think I own this product and to be able to keep the content I paid for. But they're basically, taking advantage of these, these licenses you sign when you do buy a game. These licenses we sign when we sign up for services like on our phones and on PlayStation that are a million pages, and most of us don't have reasonable time to actually read as a human being. Unfortunately, there are clauses in a lot of these for digital ownership that do state that you're basically renting a digital license. You're not really physically owning this game. So that brings into question all of us, people like me or people, anybody who has a Steam library, who has a PlayStation library, who goes all digital. What if these, the big question is what if these companies, decide in the future we're not going to support these licenses anymore, or they physically can't if the company goes out of business or what have you years in the future. You're going to lose content, access to all this content that you paid your hard-earned money for. And that's something that's very concerning to me, especially here, and we're seeing it already happen right now. And you could say, yeah, these are old games, but it doesn't really matter. That could be a counter argument, but then again, these single player experiences aren't the only things being revoked. These multiplayer rather aren't the only things being revoked, and you're actually losing single player content here, whether you paid for it or not. So I want to transfer this over to you, Ben. If you want to, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well for a little bit here. But I just think it's upsetting to see that again, these are all like around 10-year-old games, but that this is happening.
I mean, it's interesting because there have been other games for for a number of reasons that have been removed, and typically they end up getting removed for purchase. But like on Steam, if you had purchased it, you can still download it because like maybe not illegally because of the terms of service that you signed. You own the game. Again, in the eye of the consumer, I own the game. I bought it.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when things like that happen, they just, hey, you can't buy it anymore. You own it, you can download it. Same thing with DLC for those games. Typically, it's I mean, there's been other more modern games that have, Ubisoft just put out a handful of live services like Hyperscape. Essentially any live service game that you buy, any kind of microtransactions or cosmetics or I've been playing Destiny a bit more here recently, and I purchased Beyond Light so I could get access to some of the subclasses. But in theory, tomorrow, Bungie could come out and say, "Hey, Destiny 3 is where it's going to be at, and none of your purchases carry over. Too bad." And I mean, yeah, I could go back and play Destiny 2, but 5 years from now, when they don't see the point in running those servers and they decide to shut it down, it's a bit more extreme in this case, but it is a multiplayer only game.
Yeah.
But it's still the same concept. Like, it's at any point, anything that has anything to do with a network connection that the developer decides to just stop supporting for one reason or another can go up in smoke. You could have spent nothing because it was free to play, or you could have spent thousands of dollars over the lifespan of the game. But as soon as it's not profitable for them, they can pull the plug. And if it didn't have a single player component at all, you're just out of luck. And
think about all those people spending thousands on Fortnite skins that are eventually going to fade away.
Right. I mean, I think like League of Legends and Fortnite, I mean, again, realistically, the next 2 to 5 years, are they just going to suddenly go away? Probably not. But, eventually, maybe it's, again, speculation. I assume at some point, League of Legends and Fortnite are just going to stop being played and they're going to go out. Maybe I'll die, old age, and it'll still be Fortnite and League of Legends for all I know. Like, it's possible, but it's just, digital ownership is really weird. And I know I've seen a few people talking about how NFTs would solve this because you'd own it, but that misses the point that without their servers, it doesn't matter if you own a token that says you own this game, it still runs through their servers.
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't help. That doesn't solve the problem. And I understand there's, potentially some IP copyright related issues. Like, they can't just make a public version of the server so that I could run a server and let my friends connect to it and we could just play internally. Or if I wanted to, host a server and people could connect to it and play it, I understand there's some copyright concerns there. So it really is a tough spot. I mean, the business side of me says expecting them to continue to run a server for a game that is probably not making them any money. It is, actively costing them.
Yeah.
Again, for Ubisoft, probably a drop in the bucket, like, money financially. But still, like, is that reasonable to expect? Probably not. But at the same time, it's, it's revoking access to something that someone purchased. And I know I've seen some talk that some of the European countries do have a little bit different take on this, and possibly what Ubisoft is doing in some of them might be against the law. So it'll be interesting to see once this actually happens what comes out of it, because it's interesting to see non-live service games being decommissioned in such a way.
It's strange, and I think I especially you brought that EU regulations. I know there was kind of a similar situation with the iPhone where they basically I was definitely looking forward to the USB-C coming to iPhone. That didn't happen when they kept predicting the past few years, and the EU Commission basically said, look, you need to give people a reasonable modern charging ports. They're basically going to force Apple's hand here, American company or not, to have to really fit that standard. And I think, Apple probably has, plans years in advance. They may have already been planned to fit that standard regardless, and it's just kind of delayed. But I think we're seeing a similar situation now here where, luckily, thankfully, that European, Commission would be doing this. But if they said, hey, you owe the consumer the right to the ownership of the product they're paying for, it's really not lawful to say that they can't own, especially a single player IP or something that can just be a downloaded key, on a console that they can't just access. I agree that I hope that would, influence these companies to make a decision, but I would also just hope that they would do that of their own accord. But I don't, that maybe be too naive there. I mean, this is something that, not to get too grandiose, but it's something you see a lot of aspects here of everything moving to subscription services and pulling more ideas of ownership away from the consumer. I mean, you see it with these services of PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass of not, obviously people see it as a pro-consumer move, but having, to be at their beck and call of paying them a subscription every month rather than owning your old games and just playing them and not giving them more money each year. To be paying for these classics catalogs and these backwards compatibility. It's really a service I'm paying for. It's not that I'm getting backwards compatibility. I'm paying, for the monthly for the privilege to actually access that. So I think it's funny. This is completely off the topic of gaming, but I heard a story this week that BMW is now going to be charging a monthly subscription for their heated seats in their cars. And this is something that you see in a lot of different industries where it's technology that's already part of the system. It's already part of the car. It's already paid for. There's really no extra cost, but they're just, you're at their, the beck and call of the company to decide, hey, we're going to charge you monthly for the service just because. I mean, you see it with, things like software as well, where you buy software in the past, where you could pay $800 for a piece of software, something like the Adobe Suite or something like that. Now it's, you got to pay us at least $100 or so dollars per year, or we'll revoke your access, or you got to pirate it, or, we're not going to let you keep it. So I'm very hesitant of the whole idea of society moving towards this. You don't really own anything and you're paying subscriptions to corporations to use everything you're doing on a daily basis. I'm very much not a fan of that, and not to get too grandiose there, like this sci-fi dystopian, like I often do with these topics. But that's kind of the way I think about it. I'm like, I just don't like the feeling of that. I want that disc. I'm kind of going forwards to thinking about buying discs again, almost.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because again, with Ubisoft, there was a lot of confusion over the Assassin's Creed Liberation specifically, because at one point the warning on Steam basically said it's being taken down from sale and will be inaccessible, period. Like, even if you bought it in the sale
you can't
2 days ago, you won't be able to get it. They came out and said, oh no, that's not what we meant, which, again, the cynic in me was that what they wanted, and then just decided to backtrack on. I saw some rumor that like maybe they were going to pull that off Steam and bundle it with Assassin's Creed Infinity, try to make that service look better. But it is interesting, the whole idea behind like Game Pass. I'm a big proponent of Game Pass. I spend $15 knowing I don't own any of those. I don't have any expectation that even if I have the files on my computer, if I cancel my Game Pass subscription, I don't expect to be able to access Farming Simulator. But if I bought a game on Steam, or if I bought a game through the Windows Store, an Xbox Store, if I paid for that game, mentally, I have that expectation that in 3 years, I should be able to still download it and play it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no reason I shouldn't be able to. So it's that, it's an interesting, how you approach it mindset when you're paying for subscription like that. And the last thing I'll say, kind of on this whole topic, Ubisoft is a Canadian company, I believe. And, a lot of times, it's easy to think like, oh, well, if they're a U.S. company, Canada laws don't really apply. And in a sense, that's true if they don't want to do business there. Like, Ubisoft might be a Canadian company, but if a third of their revenue comes from the EU, then they're probably going to comply. And at that point, if you're complying with one company or with one country or with one region, you might as well comply with them all. And a good point for that is Valve's refund policy came about because of their lawsuit in Australia, because the way they were handling refunds, or rather not handling refunds, was against Australia's consumer safety practices. And that kind of just like, they're already going to have to comply with it. They went ahead and made it apply to everybody. So, for anybody that might sit there and think, oh, well, if the EU does try to make a restriction, like, it doesn't matter. It might. If they want to do business there, they have to abide by the laws in that country.
And I don't think they're going to start packaging things differently for the EU. It would probably be a more simpler move to just, streamline that and abide by that in all their regions. If it was like a packaging deal or an ownership thing, and not, it's something that people talk about a lot when it comes to like things like censorship, or like, do you want to comply with certain, other regions that may be censoring things that other markets wouldn't? And that's obviously the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum there, where obviously you'd want to like keep towards your artistic vision or whatever, you're coming out of, what your intentions. But on this thing where it's really, on the opposite flip side, more so for like consumer practices and defending the consumer here, then of course you'd want to hope that like that at least, common denominator of the best practices would be being followed. And I think that's, obviously overall a good thing, especially with that Steam refund policy there. I mean, that's obviously a positive outcome there for the consumer. And that's something I would hope that as someone who buys a lot of games digitally on PlayStation, and on the flip side there, obviously I bought Steam games as well. But when I buy digitally on PlayStation, I'm paying, $70 or $60, whatever that price is. I expect that I own that game until PlayStation, goes out of business. I'm assuming, PlayStation won't last forever. I don't, again, like you said, when I'm an old man, I don't know if I'm going to expect to have these games still, but I'm hoping that either there's a system that I can, retain that or be able to, keep that going as long as, they're supporting that. But that's something I worry about too. What if PlayStation goes about it, this is totally hypothetical here. What if PlayStation goes out of business, 30 years from now? Now all my legacy games I want to go back and play, they're all gone. And my PS5 is now a brick. It doesn't work anymore. Even though it's a retro console at the time. Like, I don't, what do you do then? Or maybe the servers even shut down before then, with everything kind of being on this like online clock. I mean, we've seen this with PS3 and some of the older systems that once they kind of got into the internet generation, how we're now concerned about, preserving that when those servers kind of time out, just general console, support. So that's something where PC, both emulation and just like preserving games in a PC version, I think really matters because that's really what stands the test of time, I think.
Yeah, and I guess my last thoughts on this. We brought it up before. What essentially at some point one of the only options will be piracy, and I don't condone it. I wouldn't recommend it. It's you're more than likely hurting the people who made the game. Like there's a lot of reasons to not do it. But I forget. I want to say it was Gabe Newell who, when talking about Steam. Like his whole point was, people will choose piracy when it's the easiest path. Like if you give people an option to buy a game at the click of a button, and they can do it, legally, safely through a reputable seller, like they're just going to do that, and that's how Steam has gotten as big as they are. So it will be interesting to see the results of that. When the only way to play an Assassin's Creed game with all the DLC you bought is to pirate it. Like, you're still out of the multiplayer option unless someone makes a server and can reverse engineer it, which is a whole separate topic. But again, with Liberation, if they had actually removed it and just outright made it impossible to play, the only way to get it at that point would have been piracy.
And that's September 1st, just to re-clarify for our viewers. It's not like, 10 years from now. It's this year. That's not that old of a game. It's a game I had bought on PS Vita when that originally released. It's a portable game. Then it was ported to the consoles. But yeah, that's a game you just, again, I guess PS Vita version, and then I think about that. But still, it's a game that was just going to be inaccessible on console and everything else. So it's strange that they would do that, especially for single player IP, especially when they're at a time where I feel like, specifically Ubisoft is kind of on the rebound of, like, we talked about this with Valhalla a few weeks back about how they kind of need to gain their audience's trust back a little bit. And I think, doubling down on things like this and like having these be the headlines, isn't really the best for them right now.
Yeah, and I did love how a lot of people pointed out that they announced Skull and Bones with the reveal and then announced this stuff. And it's like, it almost feels like, Skull and Bones' motto of long live piracy, followed by that was coincidentally perfectly timed. But
that is very funny. I didn't even consider that. That's kind of a 1-2 punch there with that joke. I love that. But kind of speaking about like game preservation, and that's why I have an article queued up here that I'm going to bring up on screen for our viewers here in a second. But this is a crazy story I heard this week. It's kind of caught me off guard. I messaged Ben on Slack as soon as I saw it. I was like, oh, we got to put this on the show next week because this was something else. I was not expecting this. Speaking game preservation, a large topic is the Metal Gear Solid series. So the Metal Gear Solid series is a game that's basically like the first 3 or 4 games are basically inaccessible unless you have a PS3 and can, find these games on like eBay or a third-party source, because there's no digital versions, there's no PC ports, they're basically locked to the PS3 generation. You can't stream them on PlayStation, back and pat. So, unless it's like Metal Gear Solid 5 really, even like the latest game, it's very hard to find these games now. And then people have been kind of clamoring. I think it was the 30th anniversary actually Metal Gear this week, and people were clamoring this week again, can we get these games, either packaged on PC or, doesn't have to be remastered, but everybody was like hoping they can get these games kind of preserved in a good way. And that's something that a lot of people talked about when Mass Effect Legendary Edition came out last year, but it's a good way to package a whole series in an ideal way, have it on PC, have it like kind of like future proofed a little bit. And that's something that people are talking about with Metal Gear. But to talk about the story we're talking about, that was kind of crazy here. You may know Hideo Kojima, the creator of the Metal Gear series, Death Stranding, and more. he was actually involved in some world political news this week. So not to get too into politics, obviously this is a gaming show here, but I do want to note, you may have heard this week about the assassination of Shinzo Abe, the former Japanese prime minister. Apparently a fan of the Metal Gear Solid series thought it'd be funny to make a joke. I believe it was on like a forum site or something like that, that it was Hideo Kojima. They tried to make like an offhand comment, kind of a goofy internet joke. Apparently, I don't know if it was meant to be innocent or was meant to be, slander, but again, it still was. I think if you knew of, who he was, it was obviously a joke, I'm assuming. That being said, a lot of international, observers ended up picking up the story, didn't understand the context of the humor maybe, and then translated the story into a real, thinking he was a real political suspect of this really large scale, political assassination. So kind of a crazy story here, but you had Hideo Kojima's face on international news, programs discussing that he potentially could have been, purporting some sort of ideology through it, and promoting this kind of and has been planning this. So to think about how, a simple joke or something like that could turn into that level of slander where this, the Kojima Productions that come out this week and announce, we will take legal action where need be. This is not, unfounded. And I think, it's not really funny at all, but it's just kind of, it's a crazy story to me because, Metal Gear Solid is also a series that, especially back in its heyday, was a lot about like, the digital age and misinformation and that kind of political, that's kind of a lot about like the early stories of the earlier games. And to see, just random hearsay, without any evidence, just a random statement as a joke that could just snowball into this real issue that they're going to have to deal with now for, probably months on end. Like how, the aftermath of the slander is it's crazy. And it's kind of upsetting in a way about how what's the word? How fast a wildfire can captain the internet these days, good or bad. And I think it says something about misinformation a bit, where even when you think you're joking or you think it's innocent, how even seemingly innocent misinformation can be taken from the wrong context or in the wrong source and then distributed in a misinterpreted way. So again, it's not not to get too into politics and the internet, but like it's just a crazy story that's such a prominent figure in the video game space was part of this larger story, and a lot of people had picked this up throughout the world. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that as well, Ben. I think it's very, very interesting.
I mean, it's bizarre. And I mean, I know we talked a few weeks ago, it might have been the show before this last weekend, about, speculation on the internet and how, like an offhanded comment from someone might be picked up as official word about something from a game. And I mean, obviously this is a real world, again, politic wise, I don't know Japan's politics. I don't know who this guy was. I don't know what he might have been loved for or hated for. If he is anything like the U.S. politician, he's got people that love him and hate him. But it's that idea that one offhanded comment can be blown up and just picked up and unverified and just suddenly become a thing, but in a very real world, very dangerous way. You can't understate the potential harm that this could have done and will do. I mean, like you said, who knows? There are going to be people that saw the initial headline like, "Ooh, he was a suspect for it." They'll never see the correction. They'll never see that that it was unfounded, basically hearsay from a corner on the internet. That the last story people will see about it for potentially years will be he was rumored to be the person who did it, and that's damaging. And
it's just a shame. Yeah, it's unprecedented how that can just continue to damage someone's career, their life, whatever it may be, but based on who's gonna react in what way to that, because it could be a minor reaction, it could be a volatile reaction, it could be it's a very, again, not to get political, I don't know the context of obviously it's a very serious situation regardless of your opinions on politics, whatever. Obviously it's like a very it doesn't happen very often in the world sphere for this for a political assassination. It's a very serious subject. So again, not trying to comment on anything I'm not educated on or anything in that matter. But I will say to then consider how serious of a situation it is regardless, and then to slander somebody, whether it's, again, I don't know about the original poster. I didn't see the original post or how this started or anything like that, but I do know it probably wasn't with the intent of like damaging him. It was probably like a fan of the Metal Gear series. Even I would even presume it was someone who was kind of like a video game fan or just made an offhand joke to be funny or whatever they were trying to do for their own personal reasons. But that just shows the strength of that. And I think, like, just like you said, like, whether it's from one corner of the internet, it could spread like wildfire, and it could, and then could, again, people never see that correction. It could damage someone's life, indefinitely. So it's definitely something to be aware of. And just, it's crazy how things can get so blown out of proportion these days so quickly. But I guess we can hope that people will try to be responsible with fact checking and sourcing their we live in a world of dealing with the issue of misinformation these days, and that's kind of a topic way beyond my my purview here in terms of gaming. So I don't want to get too deep into that. But yeah, it's definitely bizarre. Definitely something else for a video game story this week. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're very fortunate it got sorted out before anything did happen.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I hope wishing there nothing nothing else bad will come out of that situation. Hopefully that'll be able to be worked out, and hopefully they'll be able to square that away in a proper way. And it's just something else. But I do want to continue moving on here. We actually had another story kind of connects a little bit to our Ubisoft talks. This is a former Assassin's Creed veteran developer here. This goes back around to Sony though. So Sony, you may have heard this in the past few months, had acquired Haven Studios. This is something that has been in the talks for about a year now, but this has officially happened. The acquisition is complete. So another acquisition added to the docket of PlayStation and Xbox acquisition, the acquisition kind of race here in this past year or so. But the new headline here is that not only have they acquired Haven Studio, led by Jade Raymond, who again is an Assassin's Creed veteran, but they are also diving deep into cloud technology as well. Something we talked a bit about with Hideo Kojima, we were just talking about there a few weeks back when he partnered with Xbox to work with their cloud solutions. So now we see Mark Cerny here is also jumping in with Haven Studio on the PlayStation side of things, where, if you may remember Mark Cerny, he is the architect of the PS4 and the PS5. He's creator of Knack. He's definitely a very well-known name in the PlayStation ecosystem. And he apparently has been helping them along for a while now, working in with forward-thinking R&D is the way they're talking about this. And a lot of this research and development is going into not just cloud technologies, but also their workflow on cloud technology and kind of how they're structuring this new studio. So I'm sure things like work from home and the way they're structuring their servers and game development, apparently they're taking a bit of a new approach here. That's something that really no other PlayStation studio has done before. So again, there's lots under wraps here. I'm maybe not an expert of exactly how this is going to go down. Again, they're not saying much either, but the quote here was from Jade Raymond. I'm not able to say too much now, quote unquote, not able to say too much now, but that's obviously one of the other things been a big attractor and exciting to our team with PlayStation. Of course, Mark Cerny is like a rock star, they said. So being able to collaborate with him is really exciting. Again, Mark Cerny is creator of the last two PlayStations. They have said that what they're working on here at Haven Studio is a brand new IP for PlayStation, AAA IP multiplayer experience. So that's all we've known really about that for a while now. We've heard about Haven. I believe Disrupt as well was another studio they announced back about a year or two ago that's working on a multiplayer game exclusively for PlayStation. So again, we talked a bit about PlayStation in terms of getting into PC, getting into multiplayer gaming, getting into live service gaming, things that they really weren't their bread and butter, especially in the PS4 generation and in the past. So I'm curious to see how this is all going to work out. Curious to see how their single player curation and all of that kind of what usually is their kind of bread and butter when it comes to those single player first party games, how those continue. And I'm curious to see if these multiplayer experiences, I'm hoping, are PS5 exclusive, because I'm ready to get into the next gen here, whether it's Xbox, PC, PlayStation, whatever it is. I want to see these new gen games, not to hate on cross-generation games. Obviously, I'm happy that everyone can play the games that are coming on both consoles, but I think it's time we see what these new, this new generation can really do with no lowest common denominator of the old hardware having to be taken into account. And that's something that we've seen a bit in terms of like loading times, things like Ratchet and Clank, a game that had incredible like transitions with like SD loading times, and not many other games have been able to really replicate in the same novel way, just because of the the hardware that they're developing for. So I'm curious to see how this evolves here. I'm curious to see more from Xbox as well on this front. But yeah, obviously I'm a PlayStation gamer myself. I play on a PlayStation 5, so I'm definitely excited to see what they do next here with Haven. Do you have any thoughts on that at all with the PlayStation side of things, Ben? Or
not really. I mean, it's interesting because I don't know. I've maintained here recently, and I've maintained it for a while, that when it comes to innovation in games, you're going to see it in the indie and the first party console games, because the indie sphere just kind of does whatever they want. They're going to find something. If it's good, it's good. But then your first party studios are the ones that are really pushing the hardware because, again, there's a lot of cool stuff that PlayStation can do. But if you're making a PlayStation and Xbox title, like fiscally, it's probably not worth it to make certain aspects of the game specifically use, the PlayStation style, whatever it takes to make the PlayStation load as fast as it possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not going to be worth it. You're going to find a solution that works on both and just go with it. So, it's exciting, especially because, again, PlayStation Tech, whatever they're working on gets good enough. Whatever they're doing really well, hopefully makes its way to PC and Xbox. Competition at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
It's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do, and I hope it's fun as a game. I hope it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. And I think what you said there about developing specifically for, like, say, the PS5 with those loading times, that's a really great point of, like, I feel like this conversation comes around every generation about, like, what's going to be, like, the peak of this generation, or, like, a lot of people love to say that exclusives are going to be the peak because they're allowed to, utilize whatever console it is, either or, the most of that console to the nth extent, and not have to worry about making it work on multiple platforms. And generally, I would say that's, there is definitely some truth to that for sure about, how you utilize, just absolutely how you utilize the console. But I do think that you're going to see, whether across, cross-platform or not, Xbox and PlayStation, I'm hoping that these next-gen titles in general are going to be more exciting and have better load times and be at a higher scale. I'm sure we'll see that on both sides of things. And then, maybe later in the generation, we'll see more of these exclusives come in on each side of things that really utilize the consoles to the best extent. But it's exciting. We're kind of getting into things here. Again, we always talk about this in the show. There's a bit of a, with COVID and everything that happened with this console launch. It's obviously not the most typical console launch. We're in a bit of I would say, a gaming drought when it came to, like, launch. We had a lot of great launch games, I'd say, on, PlayStation side and on Xbox. But I think that there's definitely, we're definitely waiting for, like, the generation to really kick into gear, I think, in this next year or so. I think we're going to see a lot of that, hopefully soon. But I do want to keep moving on here because we do have another, potential future game that's going to come in the next couple years here. This is something we talked about last week, and this is Skate 4. So we had talked about last week about how Skate is, like, back, quote unquote. They're still kind of in a playtesting stage, but unfortunately last week an early playtesting build, I believe it was a build back from, they said, September 2021, was unfortunately leaked on the internet recently, and people have been downloading that illegally. So the Skate devs are asking kind of that everyone probably avoid that early build and try to sign up for their official play tests. So it's unfortunate for them that that's having to be spread around and create some, conflicts and some rumors there for this game's development. But with that being said, and with something, maybe again, I'm not assuming here, but maybe with something that was in that leaked build, they have gone ahead later in the week and actually have talked about features of the game and what Skate is going to be diving into. So they've actually confirmed that Skate is going to be just called Skate, not Skate 4. It's going to be called Skate with a period, and just kind of like we've seen a lot of kind of reboots of certain series, kind of just like unifying it all in one space. And they're going to make it a live service title where basically it's going to be free to play, which I thought was actually pretty interesting. They actually directly reference Apex Legends and how they go about cosmetics and their seasons, and how they said they kind of wanted it to be, where we can sell a lot of microtransactions, cosmetics each month, new costumes, new skateboards, of course, new wheels, things like that. But they also said, they made a comment that you could maybe potentially pay for, like, I believe the word was like convenience. So they said not pay to win, definitely not pay to win, but you may be able to pay for convenience. And it makes me think of, like, paying to get past certain milestones, to unlock certain tricks maybe. And that's where, to me, it does become pay to win, because they probably, a lot of times games will, I'm not saying this is going to happen here, but it is EA, and I want to be cautious here, and I want to just, like, think about this for a minute. I think a lot of these games here tend to, what we see from EA with Battlefront, with a few other titles where, sure, yeah, you can unlock it, but it's going to take you about 40 hours of grinding to get Darth Vader in Star Wars, for example. And that was things where, they said, you get this sense of pride and accomplishment from doing all that hard work, but really that was actually the most downvoted, I believe, Reddit post of all time when they did make that comment on Battlefront 2, just to remember that. But I believe they said, it's it's just to make the sense of pride of accomplishment and make it difficult, but really it was really just a system to promote microtransaction sales and to say, it's virtually impossible to unlock this, through your free time without like losing all fun for the game. So you might as well throw us $20 and get access to this character or this, this card or whatever it may be. So I'm hoping it's not the case where it's one of those things where they just make it a grind to the point where the players will really, really want to just jump into the microtransactions and pay for upgrades, things like that. I'm really hoping that's not the case here. I wouldn't mind if it was just all costumes and boards and decks, the different things you just swap out, but everyone was still on the level playing field. I could probably, be fine with that. It's not the end of the world there, but once we start paying for kick flips and things like that, and your things are blocked off, that's when it's going to be upsetting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'll give them a little bit more leeway because it will be free to play. You're not going to be spending $60, $70 on top of all this. And I'm a little bit more optimistic than usual because we've kind of known that this was being built from the ground up to be more multiplayer community oriented, and not just like, well, we have a skate game, let's just make it a multiplayer game and stuff it in. But I mean, ultimately, how many times have we heard pay for convenience, and that actually just means, skipping 40 hours of grind.
Yeah.
Because if it's, I'm trying to think of like what convenience could you offer, and the only two things that come to mind are unlocking tricks faster or unlocking tricks outright, and maybe unlocking maps. And I would be okay with the unlocking maps because, I mean, you'd have people that are playing on maps that you're not on. But my concern with, that really is just convenience. You're getting access to the map faster. When it comes to tricks, I mean, again, depending on what the gameplay loop is like, if it's like a competition style game where there's 10 players, you all get 3 minutes to pull off as many tricks as you can. I mean, having access to tricks that you paid for to get early, if they're worth different points, it just simply is pay to win. Especially at the start, like, day one, I download the game and start playing it. I didn't pay for anything, but John over there did. He's just, assuming we're both capable of doing the inputs required for the tricks, he will have a higher score simply because he had the tricks unlocked. Again, it's all speculation. We have no idea what the monetize, what will be there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but I mean, it's EA, so I don't want to be too lenient, but it is free to play. And it's being built up from the ground up to do this, so hopefully they're steering it in the right direction. We'll see. There's a fork in the road, and it could go the way that is tolerable and fine, or they could go down the route that just makes it, unsavory and untenable for players.
Yeah, I agree with you there, and I think it's one of those things where I think we're going to have to wait. Again, we're going to have to wait and see. I'm kind of taking everything they say about it with a grain of salt, and we'll see how I feel about it when it launches. And again, it's free to play, so I'll definitely hop in. I was always a fan of the Skate series, actually, back on console. I played a lot of it on Xbox 360. Actually, I had all 3 of the first Skate games on 360, so I definitely was a fan of the series. I'll definitely want to hop back in just because I like the idea of a skateboarding game. That was one we saw during the Devolver Digital that that showcase. That I'm definitely checking that game as well. But I do think Skate the series as well is something I've always been excited to see come back. And fans obviously were clamoring for this for a few years. That's why the project probably started. So I'm all on board with that. But again, I'm just gonna wait. I'm not gonna get excited. I'm gonna see when it comes. It'll come around, and I'll see then how I feel about it. But I do want to move on here to something we did talk a bit about at the end of our last show, and I think we have we're about 5 past the hour, so we'll probably stay for another 20 minutes, half hour. So we have 2-3 more topics to get through here today, guys. But jumping into Rockstar games, actually, I'm gonna pull this article here from CNET. So we got a few more things from Rockstar this past week, kind of going off the same thing we were going to talk about at the end of our last show. We didn't have too much time at the end of the last sentence report to get into this, but GTA 6 is definitely in active development. It's something we've been talking about for a while. Our speculations a bit. I actually spoke with the Hollow Justice team this week on our panel stream earlier this week. If you guys caught that, hear a bit about this as well. So we're gonna kind of crack back into that story for a few minutes here. But what we did learn this week was that not only that, like we've heard, did Rockstar rather put some remasters on the back burner. They also did one for Red Dead Redemption 2 as well. So we had heard that GTA 4 and Red Dead, the original game, were going to get remasters, kind of similar to the GTA trilogy. Again, I want to remind everyone that GTA trilogy was a third-party outsourced game, so that wasn't developed directly by Rockstar. That being said, they still put their name on it. Obviously, there was a lot of issues with that launch, and taking that into account, it seems like they've decided to scrap these other remaster projects and just focus solely on GTA 6 to avoid any of any more these fans clamoring for GTA 6 like they have been for the past decade or so every day on Twitter, like they probably are used to at this point, and also to just like avoid any more of that negative press it seems with the last trilogy remaster. But we did hear that on top of GTA 4 and Red Dead Redemption, that Red Dead Redemption 2 was probably going to get a PS5, and Xbox. I believe they already have the 4K version on Series X, but it was going to get a full PS5 app and kind of bring it into the next gen and kind of wrap that up. But what we have, heard, unfortunately, is that not only are these 3 going to be canceled, that they're probably not going to see these anytime soon at all, period. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen still with GTA 4, maybe after GTA 6 comes out or something. Oh, my whole screen share just jumped out to Twitter there. That's okay. But I think it's kind of interesting. And before we get into like our GTA 6 speculation, I'm curious to think like timelines here now. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Ben, with how long, Red Dead 2 was 2018. So we're thinking here there was really no support for Red Dead Online whatsoever. That's what I'm forgetting here. That's the other part of our story here, is that Red Dead Online is also going to be retired. So there's no plans to even subtly support that game with like their like missions and stuff as they have been. At this point, they're basically saying we're gonna keep like updating the weekly missions and stuff, but there's no new content coming to that game. And Red Dead Online players, this is actually, I believe, we might have covered this earlier in the year on the report. I'm not sure, but Red Dead Online players were petitioning for more content. They were petitioning Save Red Dead Online all this year. In spite of GTA Online really being the main focus from Rockstar, and Red Dead getting none of that same treatment, unfortunately. And I'm a big fan of Red Dead 2. I think it's one of the best single player games I've really ever played. And I don't want to sound hyperbolic, especially with Rockstar being such a popular company, but it really was something else. It was a really special game, and to see the multiplayer portion of that not really be anywhere near that interactivity and to have any of that real support there, it was unfortunate. But that being said, the fact that they're basically giving that game a funeral, fans are really are kind of celebrating the end of that game's support there this past week. I'm hoping that with all of this, this unfortunate news, that this new focus on GTA 6, in spite of that, is really going to be worth it. So this is where I want to, give it over to you, Ben, and hear your thoughts, and as well, maybe we could talk a bit about our thoughts on GTA 6 when it's going to come out and things like that and details.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating because, the definitive edition was handled by a third party. And I could go on about this because I had a nice, I say nice, it's sarcastic, experience with some contractors who hired out subcontractors and tried to blame them, and it was a whole thing. And my standpoint in that case is, at the end of the day, 2K, Rockstar, that combination of them were the ones that signed off on it.
Yeah.
So I mean, the third party you hired might have bungled it, but to me, by the transitive property, that means you bungled it. So that's the frustrating part for me. It's like, they're citing it bad performance, but it was like you essentially caused that bad performance, and now you're hiding behind it as a reason not to go forward with the other ones. So that's a frustration there, because I personally think Red Dead 1 was better than Red Dead 2.
Yeah,
I would have loved a Red Dead 1 remake.
Everybody thought it was happening too. I really thought they were going to build it into the Red Dead 2 engine with all that interactivity with the NPCs and
right,
because the map is there and it's not really being utilized. And everybody was like, "Where's the DLC that's going to come and just continue Red Dead 1 basically in this engine?" And it looks like that was kind of happening, and then was sidetracked here. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's just unfortunate.
I mean, I would have loved it. So I mean, that's where my frustration comes from. Is they caused the problem and then blame the problem for why they're not fixing, the problem. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, as far as when GTA 6 is going to come out, I would say I'm pretty confident in saying that the bulk of the Rockstar team isn't working on online. I doubt it's taken the bulk of the team. I mean, obviously they've made Red Dead 2 while, online was going on. So they clearly have, a substantial team that is not working on it. So yeah, I mean, 2018, if you assume 2018, 2019, they started working on GTA 6 behind the scenes. They probably left I don't want to say skeleton crew, but they left a portion of people behind to work on Red Dead Online for some undetermined period of time, probably before they realized it wasn't going to be, the money pit or the cash cow they thought they could get out of it.
It's certainly not what GTA Online has been for them. Yeah.
I mean, we've already got 4 years under our belt.
Yeah.
I could see a GTA 6 in 2023, 2024 would be my guess. I think beyond that would be bad. Because I already hear a lot of this. I already hear a lot of disdain for how long they've been milking GTA Online.
This has been a conversation for years now with GTA Online, just in general. I mean, we're sitting on about a decade here, coming into 2023, and I mean, we had this conversation with the Elder Scrolls and Starfield and Bethesda all the time with the way Bethesda cycles work, where it's just you're waiting like not 5 years anymore, but now like 10 years like for a franchise to really get going again, and it's tough. It's really tough, man. Especially someone's like I still. From time to time, I'll hop on GTA 5 just because it's still, once in a while, I just want to drive around and mess around with it. It's still not much else like it. I mean, you have Saints Row coming this year, which would be a nice kind of, that was always kind of like, even the original Saints Row was literally, they said, we want to make a GTA type game. It's always been kind of like a more zany kind of like, different GTA type experience. That's something here. If you're a GTA fan and you're sick and tired of GTA 5 for the last 10 years and you want something new, maybe Saints Row, the new one will be, something that you could sink your teeth into. But I think that, if we don't see anything about it in the next like 2 years, that'd be really, if we're going to 2023 at the end of next year and we've heard nothing, I'm thinking GTA 5, we got a trailer. I think it was 2012 we got a trailer. I want to say it was about a year before, if I'm remembering correctly, or maybe I can look this up on the side here as I say this. But I think that the GTA 5 trailer, I want to say, was 2012. And like who knows if they put out anything. Here I'm seeing August 2013, so I don't even know when that's the official launch trailer. I'm seeing a lot of different things here, but it looks like it's kind of buried in time right here, at least from what I'm looking at on YouTube. But I just think that it's been long enough. I think fans, they've felt the pressure long enough. I'm sure fans have been. Same thing with Red Dead Online, where people were saying #save Red Dead Online. It was trending on Twitter for a long time, and every time GTA 6 even gets hinted at, whether it's from Rockstar themselves or maybe a tweet goes viral from like a random Twitter account that says something about it. GTA 6 will be the top thing on Twitter. With tens of thousands of tweets all day. And that's happened multiple times in the past 2-3 years where we had like, GTA 6 is the number thing on Twitter for the next like 2 days, almost like it'll top world events. GTA 6. You look back, GTA 5 is still the highest grossing media product of all time, and that's something I say a lot when we talk about it, just because it's a crazy stat. Like that game has made, that GTA Online, really, GTA Online is what's doing this, has made more money than any other video game, movie, book, like anything, period, that could be quantified in a way that is measured how it's measured. So it's really something else. And I think that they made a quote this previous week, I think, alongside this news, that one of the leads at Take-Two basically just said, like, look, we know that we're going to have to exceed player expectations here, given how long they've been, clamoring for this. So it's one of those things where I think we said this on our Endless UAE stream earlier in the week when I was talking to the Hollow Justice team here, where it was like, what can we even add, guys? They even said this, like, there's already so, GTA already is such an established, franchise. Like, what can they even do now to improve it? Obviously, we're going to expect, graphical improvements. I'm hoping 60 FPS minimum is a thing. I'm hoping, we get some sort of more interactivity. Maybe we have, buildings we can go into. Maybe we have better car physics, better, the things like that. I'm curious to see what kind of features they can add in terms of like, extraneous features you really wouldn't think, thinking outside the box here. I'm curious to hear if you have any thoughts on that, or if there's anything on top of your head. One thing I noted earlier in this week, if was that maybe like a Saints Row system with a media player, since radio is such a big deal. Maybe you have like an iPod where you could play the radio as you're walking and you're free roaming, not just in the car. That's something that's already in Saints Row. I thought, maybe they could throw that in there too. The GTA music focus has been really big with GTA Online, and they've been partnering with bands and and making new radio stations like year after year here, which I thought was always really cool. So maybe it's something like along the music line of things. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. My headphones died in the middle of all
that.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry about that. But I can hear you now.
Okay,
perfectly.
good.
So that's totally fine.
I don't know. My biggest...
Everybody can hear you on the stream, but all good. Yeah.
Okay. My biggest hope is that they do something to really evolve the Rockstar formula. You know, the general core loop, the way the games feel, the way the games play. I mean, to me, Red Dead 2 was a lot of fun. I haven't played it on PC.
Yeah.
I'd probably enjoy it more on PC.
Yeah.
But I did get really tired of the Rockstar loop. So I don't know.
Tap A all the way to here, do this,
Yeah.
shoot these guys, tap A over to here.
I mean, it's always been weird to me that for games that are so open and big, you know, worlds,
Yeah.
A lot of the missions have exactly one way to work.
Very
you
true.
know, so I don't know. I hope I hope their overall formula improves for the game.
I agree.
You know, or just changes it all. I would take an attempted change, even if it makes it worse.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't want to see the exact same thing. I don't want GTA 5, but prettier.
That's how I'm feeling as well. Yeah. So I'm thinking, what else could this be? I'm hoping we, you know, because that's a given. It's gonna be prettier regardless. We always forget it's a 10-year-old. I mean, not I don't think we always forget. I'm saying people tend to forget, even with the remasters, and you know, you had the ray tracing update and the 60 FPS update with the new versions. You know, it's great. It's still a 10-year-old game, and like, you know, increasing load, you know, LOD distances, you know, LOD and like, you know, loading distances and stuff like that. That's cool. You know, I love seeing less fog in the distance. Like, I love all that, but you know, where's that? I think where is that real innovation going to come? Where is that next gen title going to come? Where it's like things that we really just wouldn't expect. That's what I'm really like looking forward to. And I think that, like you said, I want to see maybe a new like player controller. I want to see, you know, maybe I'm not saying you have to get rid of the classic tap, you know, tap X or tap A or whatever, or you know, whatever it is to run all that. And I know it's like kind of quintessential GTA. I'm not saying that has to change in a major way, but that's a lot of people's complaints. Even with Red Dead 2 of just like the clunkiness. I'm not that it's clunky, but like how complicated the UI can get and moving your player around. And when you're in third person, especially kind of like making sure he's facing the right way and collecting this. I think if they kind of streamlined that a bit and made it, you know, more in line with other, like, I don't want to say first person controls, but kind of when you see a third person player controller, that's a little more, you know, stable and on rails, like a first person camera would be. Maybe I don't know. I really do like the idea of GTA and Red Dead, where you can kind of spin around your character. You can look back at the camera. It's not like forcing the camera on you. I do like that freedom of control there, but I do wish sometimes it's, you know, a lot of times like in the old Assassin's Creed games where you get caught on the ledge and then you're jumping off, or like, I don't know why I'm doing those movements. So
yeah,
you know, it's like in GTA when you get caught, you're spinning around a circle, or you're trying to hit triangle to get in the car and he's running around. There's definitely room for improvement there with like their legacy, you know, system, I think, in terms, and that goes along with the formula of how they handle missions and things like that, as well, like you said. And I believe there was actually a video. I'm trying to remember the YouTuber here. Apologies if I can't cite them properly, but I remember YouTube videos. You know, people were kind of criticizing, you know, the Rockstar formula is just so outdated, and this needs we love these games, and it needs to be revamped. And I'm definitely after, you know, I'm probably in agreement there as well.
I'm pretty sure we've watched the same video.
Yeah, I think it was I'm forgetting his name. It's the guy he sits on a he sits on a
medicine ball.
Yeah, it was a very good video. I did like it was a while back that I watched. If I remember the name, I'll let us know here. But yeah, I think I saw the same video you saw, and I definitely agreed with some of the points there for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, like, I mean, Red Dead 2 being a little bit more on the less responsive end, you know, because I would phrase it in terms like I want the control, like I want the, you know, control of the character to feel responsive, and I want the shooting to be brought up to modern day, you know, third person shooting standards. It doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be like a perfect clone of another third person game. Like, they can put a Rockstar spin on it. You know, whatever the game is, I want it to feel modern.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I personally want it to be responsive, but yeah, I mean,
is that too much to ask for? I don't think it is, but I'm also like, I'm curious to see how, just knowing the way Rockstar games work, I'm curious to see how it's gonna look. I think it's like one of the most interesting, I think, Rockstar releases to me ever. Period. I mean, obviously GTA 5 was a big improvement off GTA 4 in its own right. Don't get me wrong, but I think that this is a very, especially with the way GTA has been for a decade now, I think it's going to be one of the biggest like revolutions of the series that we've seen in a while, just because of how strong this foundation has been of what GTA has meant for the last 10 years of our lives. So it's definitely going to be something else. I actually was laughing I was actually playing. This is a real story. I was playing PlayStation with a friend of mine this past week, and one of their siblings was playing the old the new version of GTA 5, and I think that one of the siblings came in and said, "Wow, these graphics are incredible. This is way better than the old one." And they're like, "Yeah, this is the old one. It's been out for 10 years, so it's been upgraded a bit, but like even like I think we're about due for like a real revolution in graphics when it comes to that as well." And we'll have to wait and see when it comes to the features wise. I'm trying to think about like driving mechanics is a big thing too. I mean, it is GTA. The driving mechanics from GTA 5 to 4 were very drastically different. There is that kind of like that, like, I don't want to say like driving on ice kind of feel that GTA can have to a certain extent, where the way your car slides. But I always did really love the GTA car physics system, realistic or not. There is a weight to it. There is a heft to it. I was a fan of GTA 4 feeling a little more heavy, but it also was a little harder to control, I'd say. So maybe a combination of like that heft with GTA 5's fluidity could be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, GTA 5's car mechanics felt really good because it allowed those moments where like you narrowly like slip between cars and you just like you barely scratch so you don't lose speed, and it just feels good in that sense. I could see a big feature of the next Grand Theft Auto being customization. Again, speaking of like cars and all that, I mean, we have no idea what the setting or anything is, but I could see them like really diving into like, vehicle customization, like, because I feel like Grand Theft Auto's path for, improving is more on the immersive aspect of it.
Yeah.
Rockstar's always been good about having extra activities and things like that to do. Like that is their strong point, is creating that level of immersion. Like you feel like you're in, Los Santos. You felt like you were in the Wild West in Red Dead. So anything that gives that feeling is probably going to be on the table.
I think you hit it on the nail. Hit the nail on the head there, where I think that's what they've been trying to do. I should say trying, but I mean, I've been doing to an extent with GTA Online, where they've continued to be like, all right, so here's this, this Los Santos tuners update, and there's all these new cars and new customizations, and you can trick out the suspension system, and like you're getting more in depth in the car culture there. You see their expansion with the music of the Dr. Dre expansion, where you're getting into like partnering with new original songs and having, Dr. Dre and Anderson .Paak, real rappers, be in the game. There's this like immersion level of like you can get involved in all these different activities, criminal activities in GTA, of course, but all these different like business revenue streams and like, or for example, the car meets system, which is another car culture thing where you just meet up and show off your custom car to other GTA Online players. I think if they really expand that and do it in a way where it's all seamless in one system, where I think where GTA Online, not that it's very cluttered, but it gets cluttered with, you're getting phone calls constantly from whatever the activities you haven't started yet. You're getting their menu, their quick menu is not really a quick menu anymore. It's like a full out, like extensive menu condensed into a quick menu format, where you're just scrolling through all these little menu tabs. I'm trying to find, this is how I order a car. This is how I do this. This is how I do this. And I feel like if they just, again, I love all that customization. I want them to go even deeper into that, make it more streamlined, and be like, really feel like it's just gonna sound like I guess, negative, but like a criminal like simulator. Like it's not just GTA. GTA has always been like you can do whatever you want, you can drive anywhere, you can go crazy with that. But you're also having all these like real, like, especially with GTA Online. I'm sure the GTA 6 version of GTA Online will be its own thing. But I'm assuming we're gonna get, like everybody's saying, maybe multiple cities. Maybe you can get on a plane and go somewhere else, and like you have certain standings in certain cities, or a certain reputation that you may have in Liberty City, New York, versus on Los Santos on the West Coast or whatever. They could have certain things like that. Where's your character from, and really really dive into like almost making it like an online RPG, almost that has like a lot of character building, a lot of that customization. It's definitely an interesting. I'm not sure where they can go with that path, but especially on online, I feel like that could be an interesting path for them.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of an old MMO called APB. It's still around today, but when it first launched, it was this cops versus robbers. You can either play as cops or you play as the robbers, or as criminals. And I started off as a cop in that game, had a lot of fun with it, and then me and a friend switched over, and there was a lot of fun because like in the game you would just randomly like, oh, we're in a van, oh look, there's a store, we're just going to ram the van into the window and start tossing stuff in the van and hope none of the cops that are playing are driving by. So I mean, yeah, pushing it more in that direction of let the player do, I would say, like minor crimes.
Yeah.
Like, again, ultimately at the end of the day, it's all about pushing that more immersive element that Rockstar is known for.
100%. And I think they're also have, and that's something you made me think of with the cops and robbers thing, is that their modding community, like they have a lot of like realistic like cops and robbers mods and servers for GTA 5 already, where you have to like really have like your character's a license in a register, registered. They have to register your vehicle, and if you're playing as a cop, you can get pulled over, and like you have to really get away with like a real player trying to be on your tail and like to stop you and thwart you from doing all these like smaller things, whether it's stealing, literally just Grand Theft Auto, stealing a car, robbing one of the stores in the game, like, and they get really, people role play and they get really into it, and they try to like, and they try to like create situations that have never happened before. And I think like if you built something like that into the game, I think that'd be huge, because again, maybe not everybody want to get so in depth with like registration and stuff like that, but they really had like a gasoline system and like like car tracking, and like if you steal a car, there's this tracker on it, and really going in depth on like that, how the police system works, because it's always been a big part of GTA's games is how the star system works and all that. If they can really like turn that into maybe even like a something that other players can join in on to chase, hey, a player just committed a crime, do you want to turn to a cop and help stop him? And maybe you could hop in on like a live event or something like that. I feel like there's a lot of ways they can make that work, or be a lot more immersive, a lot more like high stakes, or like about, I like the idea of GTA Online. That was back in 2013 when they first were talking about it. They were saying like, if you have money on you and another player kills you, you're gonna drop all your cash. And they were a little more like forgiving with that as the game launched. And it's like you're not like losing all your money. You can put it in a bank account and stuff like that. But like I think if they had a little more of like these like hardcore servers, or like you could choose if the stakes are like on or not in certain contexts, I think a lot of people would really love that, those kind of factors. But I don't know, that's just me.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, the last thing I'll say on it, I think it would be fascinating to have a Grand Theft Auto game where the player is actually, maybe just the single player, the story bit has you playing as law enforcement. Would be interesting, because like they've already done the multi-character thing.
Yeah,
so
it would be doing it again.
It'd be really cool to have like a multi-character thing where it's like, you have one character who is law enforcement, and you have another character who is a criminal, and you've got a third character that's kind of straddling that line of, not sure.
Is undercover now, is like maybe changing their mind, and like that could be a really cool dynamic. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And similar to how they did with the three kind of like trifecta of GTA 5, it's similar. You have one character who's kind of in the middle of that, maybe has to make a decision. I don't want to spoil anything with GTA 5. Like there are things that you could definitely draw parallels there, and it's something they've already kind of done. So I think that'd be a really interesting story, narrative there too, to have like some sort of corruption going on, have some sort of like, there's this overall larger plot at stake here, and how do these two sides of the the spectrum here deal with that? Maybe they're friends, maybe they're not. That could be a really interesting story for sure. So cool. I love that idea.
Because then you would have missions where the undercover character, for lack of a better term, the undercover character, like you get to choose what other character you bring in, you're going to play as. And if you bring in the law enforcement character, then you're taking that mission with the intent, to get criminals caught. It'd be a very interesting way to have a fairly dynamic story. I mean, I'm going to say this is never going to happen. This would be my dream version of it. But you could have some really cool moments there where, depending on what other character you pull in to play as during the job, determines naturally the outcome of the mission.
Yeah.
Instead of like, do you want to do the cop option or do you want to do the criminal option? It's like, no, I'm in here. I need to call another player in. If I call in the cop, then it's going to take that law approach. And if I call in, the other criminal, that's going to go the criminal approach. And that changes the outcome naturally.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I mean, again, like you said, like naturally, if that could work, I mean, there would have to be so many like coded like if X, you're see those like choose your own adventure timelines. It's like crazy lines going everywhere. Like if X happens, then Y. Like they could definitely work that out. It would probably take a lot of effort. I mean, there's games that to an extent do have, it's usually more so towards the end of the story to make it easier in terms of like, how far we're gonna branch off. Because the earlier you branch off, the more potential conflicts come in on the rest of the storyline. So that is a really tough thing to make work, like hard code in dynamically. So it's something that could happen naturally, or like had they were like these dynamic events that had certain like possible outcomes for each side of this, of law versus non. There's definitely different ways you can look at that and how you would, implement that. But I think that'd be awesome. And I love the idea of like, here, there's a bad situation happening. Do you want to rectify it? Do you want to, take advantage of it and profit off of it? Like, how do you want to address the situation? You could do either side of that. And I think that would be pretty cool.
It feels like a Quantum Dream or a Quantic Dream kind of game, more exactly. So than a Rockstar game. But no, I mean, I think that'd be cool. I think that'd be interesting. But I mean, I don't know, besides pushing that immersion angle, really what Rockstar could choose to, make new and elevate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like it's one of those things I could think about all day, and then probably like an hour from now, I'm like, oh my God, what about this? I should have said this. It's one of those it's one of those topics where you always just think of like a new thing, like, oh, that would be cool. Why not? So I'm sure we'll be talking more about, a lot of these games, on future analyst reports, especially if we hear more news and stuff.
Yeah.
But speaking of more news, we have two more stories here. I'm gonna get through this next one. I want to briefly cover, because then we'll finish on a lot more fun, I think, last story. But this next one here, this comes from another story from PlayStation. Actually, it was something I was not expecting this week at all, especially with everything else going on with them. But PlayStation here, you can see a new logo, has announced a new program called PlayStation Stars. So you can see here, this article here comes from the Washington Post. Sony announces PlayStation Stars, a loyalty program. So just to start off, this is not PlayStation Plus. This does not go into the tier system of PlayStation Plus. So this is actually fully free for all, I think all PlayStation Network users. I don't think you even have to have PlayStation Plus to sign up for this. So if you have a PlayStation Network account, if you're on PlayStation in general, you can sign up for PlayStation Stars, which is essentially what they're calling a loyalty program that is going to reward players with like digital goodies. So what they've kind of said here, and we've heard so far, is like digital rewards, things like virtual statues, like in-game items, maybe like timed events where you can get like a wallpaper, or like, things that, big and large, rare, timed, exclusive, like digital items. And everyone's going to have their own like digital collection of like Sony memories. This is something that they kind of touched on a little bit with the Astrobots Playroom game. It was a PS5 launch game. I'm not sure if you've seen this aspect of this game, Ben, on PS5, but they have this thing called PlayStation, I'm thinking of Nintendo Labo. I think I'm forgetting the name here, not Labo. It's something like it's basically a PlayStation museum virtually in the game, and you walk in and you have PlayStation 1 through 5, all of their peripherals, the PSP, the PS Vita, and they have these virtual versions of them, and you can walk around with a player and like jump on top of them. There's these giant like PlayStation objects, the PlayStation iToy, different types of discs, different types of memory cards, like everything from a PlayStation history you can unlock in the game and then go watch and look at in the museum room. And I always thought that was pretty cool. And it seems like that's kind of what they're trying to do here on a larger scale for like the whole network, and kind of like promote the, the culture of the brand, and kind of like emphasize, like the PlayStation branding and all the nostalgia and everything that kind of comes with that. And it seems like they're doing this in a way where everybody went immediately, is this going to be an NFT thing? Is this going to be some sort of blockchain kind of thing where you're paying into it? And they've gone out of their way to say that this is absolutely not going to be an NFT thing. You can't buy or sell these. There's no like external value to these virtual objects. And it seems like they want to promote, all they've been saying is they want to promote and honor PlayStation's history. It seems like this is just another way to get more fan attention and kind of more enthusiasm around the PlayStation brand in general. And more so in this article, they said for players, it's gonna be beneficial for those who've been in PlayStation for a long time and have been on that journey. They want to recognize them and reward them in distinct ways. So I'm thinking maybe, my PlayStation account has been around for a long time. I want to say PS3 era was when, I don't think it was even, you couldn't even made one before the PS3 era, but since then, I have someone who owned all the PlayStation's consoles. Maybe they were like, if you've had a legacy account, we're going to give you a virtual PS3 badge and a virtual badge for all these games you played back in the day and things like that. And people love stuff like that. I think it's always, that's why people love trophies and achievements. And that's actually kind of, it seems like they want to just expand that system here. I read more here that there's also, rewards in place for certain like game accomplishments. So whether that is getting certain trophies, gives you certain digital goodies on top of the trophy, or I also saw here that the first player who gets the platinum trophy on certain games and regions is going to have a special reward from PlayStation that'll let everyone know they were like the first to do it, which I think is a really cool feature. But a lot of people have been confused about this online, and I also kind of have the same question here as of how they're going to handle that, given that reviewers and maybe earlier accesses and developers are probably going to have a lot of the trophies for a game that maybe will go into effect on day one, and maybe we'll be more inclined to get that trophy. So I'm curious of how they're going to go about like fairness and seeing like who from day one got it first in terms of like the consumer side of things. But that's pretty much all of that information there in a gist right there, just to kind of summarize it all on a plate. It really does seem like a free program, and for them to just like garner more attention, more engagement, and just to like get more excitement around their PlayStation Plus program and their benefits and all that. But I'm curious. I know you're not a PlayStation gamer like I am, Ben, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. I think it's the interesting thing that comes with like consoles versus PC, or you get like this kind of like brand identity stuff a lot more so.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the first thing I thought of was PlayStation Home from 2008. And with the recent, like, resurgence of the talk of like a metaverse, like I could see a world where Sony rolls out, essentially a new updated version of PlayStation Home. And when you're partied with friends, you can go to somebody's home and then you can jump into games. Like a console really is in the perfect place to kind of make that work, where it's like, hey, everybody join up. We're going to join, Tony's group. We go to his home. We can walk around, see the stuff he's thrown up and he's acquired and decorated. And then we can just be like, oh, well, we all have Battlefield, boom, click Battlefield. Bam, we're all in. Like, that's my first thought is they're going to start pushing for something like that, especially with their push to have like 10 live service games and by 2026.
I don't want to interject, but Discord is coming to PlayStation as well. I'm not sure. I forgot about this story, but they're planning on a full Discord integration into their social system. So like, I would think PlayStation parties would have a basis of like Discord servers. I'm curious to see how that's all going to work. Maybe they tie that into this whole experience, but that's just an aside. Please continue. But that Discord is a wild card there as well.
Yeah, I mean, so that's my first thought is they're going to try to basically relaunch a PlayStation Home kind of deal that is a place that you can display these and have groups come together and like between games or, all that. So that's my first thought. I mean, it's cool. If that's how it works out, that's cool. I mean, I'm all for, I've never been an achievement hunter, but, if I did manage to get, cool titles and stuff like that, or cool trophies and things like, especially for whatever reason, titles are the one to get me. If I can get a cool title that it can be displayed on my nameplate,
exactly.
I'm all about that. So,
especially multiplayer matches, like, it's the whole idea. You want to show off your accomplishments. Like, oh, that guy did this and that. Oh, wow, that guy really played through this whole thing. It lets other people know, like, wow, you accomplished that. And I think everybody loves that kind of, feeling of like being able to like wear that badge in their virtual profile. So, like you said, I mean, maybe even I'm thinking in the future of like the whole, these metaverse ideas in general. Maybe we come to a future where you don't even have a menu. You have this virtual home, like you said. You show up to your virtual PlayStation apartment. You have your showroom and all your trophies. You have all your games that you can access over here on the shelf that you can pull off the shelf and play. And then it brings you to that experience. You can almost make it like this own virtual ecosystem for like the game space, like you said, and players could join each other's homes. That's a really cool idea.
Oculus already has that. If when you put a Quest on, or you put your
like
Rift
that main
on,
room,
you get that default room, and I mean there's still menus in there, but it's one step away to have the menus be like the Steam lobby, the Steam VR landing page essentially does have things up on like screens on the wall. You can still access menus, but there's already kind of a hint of that happening, and it is a bit more natural in the VR space. Just be absolutely in a room with menus around you. But I mean, again, I could see it happening. We
have PSVR 2 coming this fall as well. Maybe that's an integration thing there. Definitely possible. I like the idea of it for sure. Yeah, and that's really all there is on that story here today in terms of like the information they've given us in terms of what that could be. So it's still kind of up in the air in terms of like exactly how these virtual items are going to look, how they're going to house that. Like you said, is it going to be a virtual like showcase thing, or what maybe like what I talked about, like a 3D space, or is it just another tab on the PlayStation main menu where you can see your catalog? I mean, I'm curious to see how that's going to play into that. Maybe they update their trophies system and that it's all kind of integrated into that. And it kind of becomes its own new platform. I mean, I'm curious to see how that goes. Obviously, Sony is definitely a fan of like updating their UI throughout the console generation. Not that Xbox does the same as well. They updated their main menu a few times throughout the Xbox One generation, then to this next one. But Sony a lot, especially in the like late PS4 era, I remember they were adding features that were like, wow, like not just like UI features, but features like that were more in line with this, that were like changing the way the PS4 UI worked in general. And that's something that they've been doing early on PS5 as well. They changed the party system like once or twice here and then went back. So that's definitely, they're very open to like messing with the foundation of their UI. And I'm kind of all for that. I like the idea that they're willing and open to like new ideas and then like reformatting how they all play together. So I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one for sure about how that's going to go down exactly. But I am like, as long as it's not, we always get not to get pessimistic when we talk about the metaverse and NFTs and that, because the metaverse I think has so much awesome potential, and I think people get a lot of like get nerves around it because I think when you hear about like Meta, the company itself, and how Facebook is leveraging certain things and how other companies are kind of leveraging in other ways, there's concerns around it. But I do think that this is, at least for now, I like the idea of this. I don't have any problem with the idea of living this virtual world. In fact, I think it's really cool. I just think once you start like cutting things off, or like you said, maybe you don't really own something and they take it away from you later on. And then once you get the concerns of like the ethical concerns around it, obviously those are their own concerns and their own topics. But in terms of just the concept itself, I think people get a little wary just off the word when I don't really think you really need to be. Like same thing with live service. If it's not going to be pay to win, every time I hear live service, I kind of cringe still, just because of the way it's. But it still doesn't mean it's going to be a bad thing. But I think that there's been so many examples of people taking advantage of certain architecture systems that it gives them a negative rap overall. And I don't think it necessarily deserves that here when it comes to this kind of like metaverse concept. In fact, I'm really excited to see how gaming evolves in this new internet landscape.
Yeah, I mean the biggest problem with metaverse is the push for. It kind of swelled up in popularity at the same time a lot of NFT stuff was being pushed.
Yeah.
So, metaverse doesn't have anything to do with NFT. Like you don't need NFTs to make a metaverse work. Exactly. But they kind of came up at the same time and got pushed together, and now you can't think of metaverse without having somebody, like cold chills run down their spine think NFT. Like
And meanwhile, it's such a broad word too, on what you can even really mean by when you say the metaverse. And there's different like levels of that metaverse concept, and there's different implementations for sure. So like
I mean, in theory, your average MMO is already a metaverse. It's a place where people are getting together and using virtual avatars and playing and doing things like that. I mean, really satisfies the definition already. Yeah, so I think that's unfortunate because I do love the idea of having a virtual social space for people, to get together and hang out. I mean, VR chat, Rec Room, it's two VR examples because it's a little bit more immersive being in VR doing it. But those were both around and have gotten big before NFTs entered the picture.
Yeah. And then that goes along with, Facebook now Meta, their marketing for the past year and a half now. It's just been like, the metaverse is us and it is VR. And like these things, not that they're technically, they have to be linked together, but they're very much associated together. I think that, like you said, like an MMO already can be a metaverse. Like, Web3 doesn't have to be a VR platform outright. That's not, I don't think that's what a lot of people who are talking about the metaverse are, saying or intending. So I think that we get a lot of questions about the metaverse as well. Like, what does that mean in general? And I think that, it's obviously, I think, if you just said the word internet, it generally means somewhat of the same thing to another extent. If you went back, 30 years and said like the internet's going to be bad, because it's, of course there's a lot of good and bad that comes with the internet. But I think on the overall, it's like anything else, like TV, like gaming, like any other medium that rises up, it's going to have its negatives as well. But it's also probably going to have a lot of positives that are really going to change things for the better here, especially with the way the internet works. I'm hoping that's the case. I think that everyone's going to be a part of that in their own right to make their own, whatever metaverse is being made. I don't think it's inherently a negative thing whatsoever. But I do think it gets a lot of like these, like especially with NFT talk, like we said, it gets a lot of that that stink on it. I hate that that's the word I have to use, but I think if people just take everything with a grain of salt on the positive end too. We say that with when it comes to pre-ordering and other things. Don't get too. I said this last episode. Don't get too overexcited about things, but don't get too doom and gloom either. I think we have a lot to be excited about in terms of gaming in general, and I always want to reiterate that. But speaking of something that's a little, again, this isn't a new game or anything. This isn't anything, on the horizon. But speaking of something that's pretty cool in the world of gaming here, I think it's a cool thing to close the show out on. Is we're always love to talk about our old friend Skyrim. He's always back in the news somehow. I don't know how it happens, but Skyrim is back in the news this week again because the Skyrim Together multiplayer mod that's been in the news for a good amount of times over the past, over its development, has finally basically gone full release here. The developers have released it to everyone else. They've passed 80,000 downloads, which is pretty awesome. A lot of people have been playing Skyrim multiplayer this week. There's probably a lot of new YouTube content and stuff like that coming out for those, because I'm sure Skyrim still has a large community of people who are watching that kind of content. So it's pretty cool to see that you can play Skyrim co-op with like more than 2 or more players. You can take on some people taking on giants and stuff together, being launched into space. The typical Skyrim gameplay, but with a friend, it's pretty cool. Obviously, Fallout 76 has shown this engine is capable of this on a larger scale, but to see modders be able to do this with the, Skyrim's creation engine with none of that real backbone, I think, from Fallout 76, really, as far as I'm aware of, it's pretty impressive. It's pretty awesome. And basically, they said here that they're going to go open source. So from now on, the developers of this project are going to move to other projects, but they're letting, the community jump in with the code. They can add expansions to the code if they want, if they want to add more features. It's now an open source project, which I think is really nice. That's really it on terms of the news there, but I think it's just a really cool thing that I wanted to highlight here at the end of our show here today, that, modding is still going strong. Obviously, we have, barriers being broken here with making a single player game into a multiplayer game. I think that, going forward with Starfield as well, we talked a lot about like the modding, potential of that game next year. I think, I'm sure we'll see a multiplayer mod for that game at some point. And then once that happens, that's going to be kind of crazy. When we talk about No Man's Sky comparisons there, that'll be kind of interesting to see how that works. So I just thought it was a really interesting story that this did happen this week. And this game finally did come out for real. This mod was released. So kind of a feel good kind of story there. Pretty good. If you're a Skyrim fan, you can hop back into that and play that with your friends. Pretty cool stuff. And I do want to add on to that, actually, because we do have another. I actually do another headline that's another Bethesda Xbox IP now, and it's kind of a similar thing. I realized I didn't have this linked up here, but I want to link it up as well. This is something that, if you're aware, if you watch gaming news in general, you're probably aware of this concept. Every once in a while, someone says, can we play Doom on a new object? It's a classic. So we see I think the last big one was, you could play Doom now on a pregnancy test. Someone got Doom playing on like medical monitors. People are always trying to see where they can get Doom playing on like a non-typical chip set or a computer that really shouldn't be a gaming computer. This week is actually, I think, probably tops it all, because this one is now that Doom is now playable inside of Doom. So a modder, I believe by the names of KGSWS, that's their YouTube username there, probably, has uploaded a video here, and I do want to pull this up. And I believe it was about 8 minutes in where they get this going here. But they basically implemented a system into Doom, the game itself here, where you can actually play the same application within the application. So you can see here on the screen now, they basically made it a wall within Doom itself, modded in there, where your player controller in Doom is then translating to the player controller of the Doom app within the wall there. So kind of weird, kind of strange there how they made that work. But I just think it's kind of funny that they, in terms of some modding stories here at the end of the day, that gamers that are fans of a game will go to a lot of lengths to make something work, whether it's just for the sake of making it work, just for fun, or to to break new boundaries with things like changing the way a game works with a multiplayer mod like the previous one. So just another modding video there. I wanted to pull up real quick at the end as we got done here, just to see despite we don't have a lot of new game release news at the moment, but we do have the communities are going strong here in a ton of games as always. So shout out to the the gaming community there for keeping those games alive and well. But I don't know if you have any closing thoughts here on terms of just the news in general this week, Ben. I think we're kind of getting near the end of our show here. We go for 2 hours today. We had a double feature here today with the last week being off. So we're happy. We thank everybody who stayed tuned today with us and for joining us today.
Yeah.
But is there anything kind of wrapping up here, Ben?
I'm waiting. Talking about indies and all that. I'm waiting for a nice AA company to step in and be a competitor to Bethesda in their style of game, because if anything, the Skyrim Together release just really makes me wish, like, Fallout 76 is fine and all, but I really want like a 4-player co-op Skyrim experience, or a 4-player co-op Fallout experience. I don't want a big server, because inevitably it doesn't feel as good. Because when you have to account for 70 people or 100 people on a map and networking, there are concessions that have to be made versus 4 players walking around together. So I don't know, man. I can't wait for that day, because somebody's gonna have to do it. and my final thought is Doom running Doom's impressive, but I'll be excited when Doom can run Doom in Doom.
There we go. So now we have another barrier for the community to hit. Ben has just set that for you guys. So if you're out there and you think it's all over on the Doom front, it's not. You have to hit this new totem pole here of the new highest standard for Doom running at the best quality. So we got at another stage now for sure. So that's the challenge for everybody out there watching who's modding Doom. It's not over yet, guys. We're gonna have to keep going with that. But I think we're wrapping it up there. Maybe we'll see some more on the RPG side. Obsidian is something I always keep my eye on. They have a Avowed coming out, which is good. They're basically their kind of fantasy RPG Skyrim-esque attempt at something like that. I think at least what we're aware of, and that comes from the Pillars of Eternity franchise, which if I'm not mistaken did have a lot of like party mechanics when it came to its RPG mechanics. I'm thinking maybe you can get something kind of going on there in the same universe. Maybe they do have multiplayer aspects in that Avowed game from Obsidian, which would be really interesting. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. Again, we thought that was going to come on the summer showcase a few weeks back, didn't show up. So maybe in the next year or so, we'll see more from that. But yeah, I'm excited to see the future of that as well. I really want to see, like you said, I want to see a really cool like multiplayer RPG kind of experience. If that could happen, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, who knows what the future of Bungie as well is working on a new project. They have a lot of, with their history with live service and Destiny. I don't know why I just came to my mind there, but I'm thinking maybe their new project is something like that, MMO, but maybe if they add some more story features. I'll have to see. But there's a lot of stuff like that. It's like we're hearing snippets of. It's on the horizon. We'll have to wait this fall. I'm sure we're gonna get a lot more news coming up. But I think we're gonna near the end of our second hour here today. We're probably wrapping it up here. We have no more stories here on the docket. So with that being said, I do want to thank everyone who joined us today and who joined us at a later date to watch this on recording. We appreciate you guys tuning in with us and getting all the latest scoop on gaming news here on the channel. But we'll probably be back. We'll be back with episode 18, probably back next week, and we'll see you soon with more gaming news coming up. So that's about it from me and Ben. I want to thank you, Ben, again for joining me today. All right, and take care, everyone. We'll see you soon with the next Endless Report. Bye-bye.